Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to another unasked for yapping session. I thought I would like to talk today about perspective, I guess. So I think, if I remember correctly, it was the last video I did, or maybe it was the one before. I don't remember. I think it was the last video that I did. I talked a little bit about Black Desert Online and, where I thought Black Desert Online went wrong. And I gave my opinion as a hardcore player, fairly hardcore. I pretty much only played the game for PvP. And I think that some people were very, I guess I would say, they had a large difference in opinion, I guess would be the way that I would put it. Very large difference in opinion. And I think that most of that comes down to perspective. Because I think that I don't think that. I know that your perspective changes like everything, right? I think everyone can acknowledge that. Reality is always filtered through your subjective experience, and that can result in two people, I guess for lack of a better word, consuming the same thing, whether that's like a piece of art or a simple discussion, and they're getting completely different things out of it. They're coming to completely different conclusions. I think though, maybe it's always been this way, and in fact it probably has always been this way, but it feels like with the invention of the internet, it was like people were able to share their thoughts and ideas like so much easier and quicker than ever before. And yet I feel like, and I just inherently want to blame social media, but I don't know if I should or not. It's like people are so vitriolic about their opinions, and if someone disagrees with them, it's like, even if it's about stuff that really in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter, it's like so aggressive, I guess, for lack of a better word. And you can say that, if you're talking about like politics, well, that matters, and it's like, okay, well, sure, if that's your perspective, I guess. It's a bit fundamentally incompatible with someone like me who doesn't think politics do matter, but people think politics matter, and so they get aggressive when it comes to politics because they believe that this is an important thing, right? But it's interesting that when you talk about stuff that doesn't matter, and people can still get very uppity about it, And I just wonder if things have always been that way. They probably have been, and it's just that the internet made it so much like easier. Like, yes, it's so much easier to like share your ideas, and in a perfect world you would say like, oh well, we can share ideas and reach a middle ground, we can meet halfway and blah blah blah, all this, that, and the other. But then in reality, what just happens is people just like yell at each other and then walk away from each other believing the other person is dumb. Well, we've probably always been that way. The internet probably just intensified it. I wonder how many like wars have been started over a simple difference in perspective, looking at the same thing, right? Probably most of them. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think people have this inclination, and I don't think it's probably not even conscious. It's probably unconscious. But there's this thing that happens where when someone disagrees with you, it's like there's never well, maybe they're right. Like, let me think about it. Let me look into it. Let me look at this from their perspective. It's always like, they disagree with me, then they're dumb. They disagree with me, then they're like, it's an attack on me and what I think. But like, it's not. It's really not. People disagree constantly. Disagreeing is actually good. I think it's good for like people as individuals. I think it's good to disagree, to interact with people that you disagree with. I think most people would probably agree with that statement, like on a general level. But, it's like unpleasant. But unpleasantness is good to a degree. Everything in moderation. But, it's good to get outside your comfort zone. It's good to approach things from a different point of view. It's good to get outside of your own head. And but for some reason it feels like nowadays people don't see that as a good thing. I wonder if it has... I wonder if it's just... It feels like people nowadays are so trained to take the path of least resistance. And they're so, like, it's such a fundamental, like, thing that they seek out down to their core that I wonder if that's maybe part of it. That it's like a, it's difficult and unpleasant to challenge your own preconceptions on things. And it's way easier to just write off someone as being ignorant or, like bad, or insert whatever word you want to use here. It's easier to just write them off and not give what they're saying a second thought instead of thinking about what they're saying. And by the way, to be clear, I am so far beyond talking about the BDO video I made last time. I'm just speaking in generalities at this point. But yeah, I wonder if that has anything to do with it. Because I think that we're so obsessed with the path of least resistance. Maybe. There might be a connection there. Would kind of make sense, I think. But then also, wouldn't also the path of least resistance dictate that you don't interact with someone that you disagree with? The fact that someone would interact with someone that they disagree with kind of inherently requires them to put more effort than the minimum required, right? For existence. If the idea is that this person is always going to do what requires the least amount of effort, then they would never interact with someone that they disagreed with. So obviously there has to be something there. So if this refusal to challenge your own ideas internally is in a path of least resistance thing, is it just like a Is it just like a tribal thing? Could be. I could see that. You know, Team A versus Team B. You assign yourself to a team based off of whatever side you land on in like an argument or not even an argument necessarily, but just like whatever perspective you have. You're like, me and everyone else who agrees with me, we're Team A. And then everyone who disagrees with me is Team B. So is it just a tribalism thing? Have we gotten more tribal as time goes on? Potentially, I suppose. I think the sort of tribalism that you engage in online, people are way less likely to be confrontational or argumentative in person than they are online, right? Because when you're online, you have this shield of anonymity, and you're in this vast ocean of everything that you're like, A, there's not going to be any consequences, so the barrier to entry to seek out that confrontation, to be like, no, I actually am going to reach out to this person in some way or another. Whereas, before the invention of the internet, the telephone, the telegram, unless you were writing a letter to somebody, you had to go and face that person in person. And that's frightening, because then your survival instincts kick in, right? If you are if you're involved in a discussion in person with somebody, and then they say some shit that you disagree with, first of all, you're not going to be nearly as hostile as people tend to be on the internet, because it's a self-preservation thing, right? I don't want to be overly hostile, and then this dude might, kick my ass or kill me if I try and, get crazy with him. But you might not even interact with that person at all, just because you're like, it's simply not worth the effort, right? But the internet has such a low barrier to entry. First of all, I can be as hostile as I want because it's the internet. There's no consequences for basically anything I say ever. But even hostility aside, why wouldn't I disagree with this person? It only costs my time, which is insanely minimal, because I can simply type out this comment or, this chat in this live stream, whatever it may be the case. I just type this out and then just forget about it. There's no, there's not even really like an emotional investment, unless they're like, obviously there's people that are, I think I would say, socially maladjusted people that, require their existence to be seen by another person online. But for the vast majority of people, I think they can watch a YouTube video and then say, I disagree with that. I'm going to let this person know I disagree with them. They type out their comment, they hit send, and then they forget that video even fucking existed. They don't even know what that disagreement was about. The barrier to entry is so low with the internet. And I wonder if maybe we're becoming more confrontational in real life, because you have, millennials, younger millennials grew up on the internet. I would say probably like the second half of millennials grew up on the internet. Gen Z grew up on the internet, and Gen Alpha, is growing up on the internet. And I wonder if people are taking these internet standards, right? And they're taking it out into the real world. The barrier to entry is so low online, but then they see that as the barrier to entry in real life, and there's this disconnect happening, maybe. Because I think most people would agree that the world is getting crazier. Perhaps it's always been that way, but I think probably not. I think that the world's probably progressively been getting crazier since, like, I don't know, probably like the Vietnam War, I would say. Just like picking a time, I guess. Because the Vietnam War, like, yes, we had, you know, the war in the Middle East, but I think that the Vietnam War was kind of the last big war where, you know, people really, like, their lives were engulfed by this war, you know. Every day, even if they weren't out on the front lines, you know, it was being talked about and debated about. They were worried about it. You know, all this stuff was going on. I feel like the Middle Eastern war really got swept under the rug a little bit, in all honesty. So we've largely had nothing but peace. And I think that, I wonder if maybe we've taken that for granted, but maybe things feeling like they're getting crazier is just because the world's actually just kind of returning to, you know, a wartime state, so to speak. Because most of the world, I think, if you looked at averages, it's probably for most of human history, there's been wars going on all the time somewhere. Probably on average, the world's been at war more frequently than it hasn't been. But us in the United States, and, you know, in the Western world, more generally speaking, have largely had peace for quite a long time now. And it feels like things are getting crazier, but maybe they're just going back to what they typically are. We're just not used to it. Anyway, I'm actually schizo rambling now, aren't I? That's it. This got so far off from perspective.